Our second reading today is taken from Psalm 91, verses 1 and 2, and then 9 through 16. You who live in the shelter of the Most High, who abide in the shadow of the Almighty, will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Because you have made the Lord your refuge, the Most High your dwelling place, no evil shall befall you, no scourge come near your tent. For God will command the angels concerning you to guard you in all of your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. Those who love me I will deliver. I will protect those who know my name. When they call to me, I will answer them. I will be with them in trouble. I will rescue them and honor them. With long life I will satisfy them and show them my salvation. Late at night, some 15 years ago now, in a darkened hospital room in Olympia, Washington, my stepfather, Art, lay on a bed, sedated, breathing shallow and irregular, as his pastor, Pastor Steve, bent down close to his ear and read Psalm 91, the psalm that I just read. This psalm, this wonderful psalm of deliverance. I was taken aback. Surely Steve is confused. This isn't the psalm that you read at this time. My mother and Art's daughter had decided that it was time for comfort care for Art, who had been battling a disease for many years. There would be no deliverance. He was on his journey home. Surely Steve, who comes from a more ecstatic religious tradition than Presbyterianism, surely he would not be praying for some kind of miracle that would allow Art to wake up and get up and walk again. Psalm 23 would have been more appropriate. I've read this psalm many times for parishioners who are close to death. I've reminded them of the Good Shepherd who promises to lead them beside still water and into green pastures and invites them to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It is the Good Shepherd who takes their hand and guides on this final journey, the journey into God's embrace. When in deep pain or difficulty, the words from Psalm 91 are so powerfully optimistic that I worry they might engender false hope sometimes. No evil shall befall you, for God will command the angels concerning you to guard you in all of your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, as we hear echoed in the tempter's seductive words of Jesus, as Jesus is invited while he's in the wilderness to throw himself off the pinnacle of the temple and really prove that God cares for him. Emanuel Hirsch, a prominent Lutheran pastor and theologian in the 19th century, wrote one time of his visiting a distressed village woman whose son was away at war and reading Psalm 91 to comfort her. Then he said, seldom have I seen such a deep spiritual response as such a blessed comfort swept over her. She had taken the psalmist's words as a personal oracle, a promise from God that her son would be kept from danger in the war. As tenderly as possible, I tried to help her understand that this kind of trust in God was less than Christian. She strongly rejected any such suggestion. After that, I avoided this psalm in pastoral care. For anyone gripped with fear for a loved one or for themselves, and I can imagine those who have friends and relatives who are undocumented immigrants and are very fearful right now. this time in our nation's history. I can imagine promises like that are found in Psalm 91 that promises of protection and care, that it might buoy them and offer hope. And that would be wonderful, but they also might lead to questions about one's lack of faith or God's reliability if the worst were to happen. When I was a pastor in Seattle, they had a soup kitchen every Monday lunch for the unhoused. And so every Monday morning and lunchtime, I would go down there and help the lunch crew out, and then I would eat with the guests. And I got to know one guest pretty well. His name was Frederick. And he was cynical as heck about religion and about God. But we ate together almost every Monday at lunch. One time he had gone up to the church office to get a bus ticket that we gave away. And later I was down there with him, and he said, well, how come the office isn't open? I couldn't get in. And I said, well, it's President's Day. He said, oh, I didn't know God took 3-day weekends. All right. Just these sarcastic responses. I'm sure that if I were to read this psalm to Frederick, he would wonder, where was this protector God when he was shot and ended up losing a lung? Or where was this God's protection when he sleeps outside in the cold, especially during the winter, every night? All this sweet talk about protection from evil that we find in Psalm 91. What if experiencing good rather than evil in life is just a matter of dumb luck? I read some research recently about luck. Psychologists conducted experiments with people who reported themselves to be lucky and others who reported themselves to be unlucky. In one study, lucky and unlucky people, according to their self-reporting, were given a newspaper and were asked to count how many photographs were inside. On average, the unlucky people took about 2 minutes to count the photographs, whereas the lucky people took just seconds. Why? Because on the second page of the newspaper, there was this message: stop counting, there are 43 photographs in this newspaper. This message took up half the page in type more than 2 inches high. It was staring everyone right in the face. The lucky people tended to see it. The unlucky people tended to miss it. Personality tests suggest that so-called unlucky people tend to be more anxious than lucky people, and anxiety seems to disrupt people's ability to notice the unexpected. And this makes sense. When you're in your head ruminating about something, anxious and worried, it's difficult to see what might be right in front of you and creatively engage it. Researchers went on to theorize that lucky people generate good fortune via 4 basic principles. 1, they are skilled at creating and noticing chance opportunities. 2, they listen to their intuition. 3, they create self-fulfilling prophecies through positive expectations. And 4, they adopt a resilient attitude that transforms what might seem at first glance bad into good. By intentionally developing these skills, one can become luckier. And some psychologists even run a luck school, as they call it. Well, I don't know much about luck, but I know something about blessedness. And it's been my experience that those folks who consider themselves blessed have developed that sense through spiritual practices of prayer, of faith, pondering Scripture, gratitude, community, as Alf talked about this morning. Like luck, blessedness can be learned and can be practiced. For blessed people, protection from God, as Psalm 91 describes, the protection provided by God, not necessarily from God, protection provided by God, as Psalm 91 describes, is what they expect, and so it is what they get, even in their darkest times, even their times of greatest struggle. So when the tempter suggests to Jesus that Jesus cast himself down from the pinnacle of the temple, and he quotes Psalm 91, Jesus rebuffs the temptation. He doesn't need some magical deliverance to assure him that he is blessed of God. He's just risen out of the waters of the Jordan and has heard this voice from heaven saying, "This is my beloved child." He understands himself to be blessed. He doesn't need any magical deliverance. Amid his hunger and thirst, when everything around him screams of vulnerability and loss, he trusts that God is close at hand and that this present wilderness will soon pass. And of course, I began to understand that when Pastor Steve bent down close to Art's ear that evening to read Psalm 91, he was not reciting an incantation that he hoped would magically bring health to a worn-out body. Rather, he was simply stating what Art already knew and had experienced his whole life long. These last few earthly hours would be no different. Those who love me, I will deliver. I will protect those who know my name. When they call to me, I will answer. I will be with them in trouble. I will rescue them. I will honor them. With long life, I will satisfy them and show them my salvation. Thanks be to God.